What's up, guys? It's Miss Painter. I'm going to read you the poem that we're going to be going over throughout this week so that it will help you with your shared reading questions. So before we get started, the author of this poem is Tupac Shakur, who is an extremely famous rapper, probably one of the most famous rappers of all time. He was extremely popular in the 90s, and he died a very tragic death in 1996. He was shot in Las Vegas. There's lots of crazy conspiracy theories around his death, but he was a very famous rapper in the 90s, and he also wrote poems. A lot of people don't really know that he also wrote poetry kind of on the side of his rapping career. So we're going to analyze one of his poems this week called The Rose That Grew from Concrete. So I'm going to read it for you and explain what it means. So, The Rose That Grew from Concrete by Tupac Shakur. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared. Okay, so let's break this down a little bit and kind of talk about what it means. So, in this poem, we're talking about this beautiful rose growing up from a crack in the concrete. So think about if you're walking down the street and you see this amazing, beautiful flower growing out of the concrete, you would just be so shocked and you'd stop to look at it, because how often do you ever see a rose growing up out of the concrete? That's an amazing thing to see. So roses, we kind of think of them as something that symbolizes beauty and love, but they're also very dangerous because of their thorns. Okay, so in this poem, Tupac is kind of comparing himself to a rose. Okay, so he's saying that he's the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete. So if you see something growing up from a crack in the concrete, concrete is hard and it's man-made and there's no dirt. There's nothing to sort of give strength and life to that plant. It's just kind of growing up out of nothing. So it grew up from a place with no nourishment and was still successful, was still able to thrive. So concrete in this poem kind of represents a place where people expect nothing good to come from. Tupac was born kind of in he was born in Harlem, which is a place that was actually produced a lot of amazing art and was very full of culture and life, but people didn't look at it in a very positive light. They viewed it as a kind of a ghetto, and it really wasn't. They had amazing things that were coming out of Harlem, but people didn't really take him seriously because he was from Harlem. Okay, people thought that he was a thug, and he wasn't. He was just a rapper and a poet. Okay, so he's telling everyone that he's a rose that grew from the concrete. Okay, and when he started in on his rapping career, people kind of wrote him off. They thought he was a bad role model. They thought he wasn't really a good singer. So they kind of stacked all these odds against him, trying to keep him from succeeding in life. Okay, so throughout Tupac's life, people constantly doubted him and labeled him as a thug, labeled him as someone who they didn't think would ever be successful. Here we move down to this line, funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. So it's talking about how this rose kept its dreams. But really, when we're talking about the rose, we're talking about Tupac, right? So he's saying that he was able to hold on to his dreams. Something that was really important to Tupac throughout his career and his life was never letting go of your dreams, always holding on to them no matter how impossible they seemed to achieve. Okay? So he followed his dreams no matter what people told him, no matter if people told him that he couldn't be successful, if he didn't look like someone who could be successful, right? All these people told him he couldn't be successful because of what he looked like, where he was from. They thought he was just a thug, and he wasn't. He was a musician and a poet and all these amazing things. But he followed his dreams even when people doubted him. So then he says, long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared. So no one in his life supported him, but he was able to be successful anyway. He was an amazing artist, right? He made billions of dollars and was incredibly successful, even though no one was ever in his corner rooting for him. Okay, so Tupac really does a good job of comparing himself to this rose throughout this poem and showing how he was able to be successful even when people doubted him because of where he came from, because of the color of his skin, because of how they viewed him as a person. Okay, So he was able to be successful despite all of these circumstances. So that's some of the imagery that we're going to see in this poem by Tupac Shakur. Thanks for listening, guys.